Good morning, Stephen D. Well, liberal journalists, here is your perfect example of what a liberal hippie looks like. You know, the people that like to punch and complain about and bitch about the people that aren't getting behind Hillary Clinton. That's me. You look at him, 60 years old this September, former attorney until I had to resign because of disability. And I'm just one example. There are a lot of other hippies I see all the time. You know, people that you disparage. My son graduated magna cum laude in 2 degrees, Japanese and psychology. He can't find a job that pays him more than $10.90 an hour. He just recently got more than, 28, 26 hours a week. People I go to when I stop at the local coffee shop. Old, young, often working 2 jobs and going to school, struggling to make ends meet, burdened by student loan debt. Bunch of hippies. I don't know why they don't like you, Hillary. I don't know why they, I don't know what they've done to make liberal journalists so upset with them, but apparently, they're crazy-eyed liberals, crazy-eyed hippies, just wanting something for nothing, wanting the government to, provide them with free stuff. I've always been amazed by the way that our media operates, but never more so than lately, as the media has been more and more consolidated in the hands of a few large major corporations. And we're seeing what were once a diverse and owned group of communications businesses, which offered often a diverse view of opinions, more and more limited. I've seen this year more and more people that were very progressive, at least prior to this year, suddenly jump on the Hillary bandwagon. Why are they doing that? Well, you tell me. But they like to punch guys like me. I was an attorney back in the 80s. Had experience in banking, bankruptcy, corporate mergers. And one of my last big jobs was helping a local savings bank deal with its, quote, workout issues. Because we deregulated the savings and loan industry. Savings and loan industry no longer exists, by the way, because the savings and loan crisis essentially crashed and destroyed that industry. At that time, it was the largest financial collapse, financial institutions collapse in our country's history. Little did we know that far worse was to come when the major banks would be completely deregulated under the Clintons. And yet we're the hippies because we're saying, why did you bail out all the big banks? You did nothing for the people who lost their homes. You did nothing for you did nothing to go after all the people that committed crimes, that worked for these financial institutions. Beats me. My daughter, I guess she's a hippie too, going into her senior year at a one of the preeminent science and engineering schools in the country. As I said, Dean's List. She's going there paying an exorbitant amount of tuition and living expenses for several reasons. One is that she was able to, through her hard work during high school, obtain scholarships, merit scholarships. Second, she's taken on student loans. Third, my wife and I have pretty much, I know I've depleted most of my life savings to help fund her, and her grandmother wisely had set aside some money in 529 accounts, which are these special accounts for education, for paid tuition of your children or grandchildren. And still, it's costing us, everything we had. Her goal was to go and get a PhD in biomedical engineering. That was her goal. She's now had to revise that goal. Why? Because she realized she cannot afford, we've already spent what we could for her to go to this prestigious school, and her grandmother spent what she could, and she's gone into debt. And to continue to pursue a graduate degree, in biology or further science to get a PhD would result in even more massive debt. Probably debt exceeding, she's going to come out of the school she's at right now with a debt in excess of $20,000, which actually is pretty cheap considering that, but that's because of her scholarships and other things that, in the fortunate foresight of her grandmother. But she's not going to have that benefit going to graduate school, so she'd probably run up another $100,000 or more just to get a PhD. She now realizes she has to go out and go into the workforce, assuming that she can find a job in the area of biomedical engineering, which I hope she can. And supposedly the school she's going to has a good record of placing its students. And she's a Bernie bro. What do you know? Surprise. Surprise, huh? She's one of those women that have been confined to a special place in hell because they're not voting for Hillary Clinton. Now, to be clear, I've never been a big fan of Hillary Clinton. And, I suppose people could say, well, that's because I'm a white male and I'm a sexist and blah, blah, blah. Even though I married a woman who is a prominent feminist, kept her maiden name, has always called us partners, doesn't want to be called a wife, had her own career until she too was struck down by cancer and then disability due to the issues related to her cancer. But this is why I haven't liked Hillary. She hasn't done anything. What has she done for people? Everybody talks about all these accomplishments she had. She was given the opportunity to come up with a health care reform plan back when Bill Clinton first became president, when the Democrats controlled Congress, and she screwed it up royally. She wouldn't even discuss the issue of single payer because, lobbyists in the pharmaceutical industry never get past them. So then she started taking credit for things other people did. And then miraculously, while she was still resident in the White House, she gets anointed by the Democratic establishment as the candidate for Senator of New York before Bill Clinton's term in office was even up. How many people do you know can just jump from never having run for elected office to becoming a candidate for the Senate? Well, I voted for her. What did she do? She started supporting Wall Street. And, her husband, of course, had been prominent in making sure Glass-Steagall, the last of the laws that prevented consolidation of the financial industry and regulation of the financial industry, was eliminated, which led to our crisis in 2008, which almost brought down the world economy. She voted for the Iraq War and has never really apologized for that. And she says one of her mentors and best friends is Henry frickin' Kissinger. War criminal. The man that essentially told Nixon to go ahead and bomb Cambodia when we had no right to do so under international law. Man who supported the murder of millions and millions of people in Vietnam, who was the leader of the policy that, bombed North Vietnam with indiscriminate bombing by B-52s. This is the person she looks toward, and yet she's progressive and I'm just a dirty effing hippie. The woman who cackled in glee when they killed Gaddafi. Another war that she supported, intervention that has led to the collapse of any kind of stability in that country. I'm not saying Gaddafi was any saint, he's not. Neither was Saddam Hussein, but when we went in, we made things worse. More people died. Right now, we helped create ISIS. We didn't eliminate terrorism. We just made sure that it kept going. We fuel the flames of terrorism by these activities, and she is now, her forward policy is clear. She intends to be more interventionist in the Middle East, to be more confrontational with Russia and Iran. Think about that. My daughter has a young man. Now, he can't be called a dirty effing hippie because he's a libertarian. But he also joined the National Guard to help finance his education. He wasn't able to get the kind of, scholarships that my daughter did. And he just recently came back from deployment, or I shouldn't say deployment, but further training in preparation for deployment. New York National Guard unit spent 6 to 8 weeks in Louisiana swamps preparing for possible deployment. What does that tell you about the expectations that our political elites have? I remember when all of the liberal journalists were very anti-war when Bush was in office, and yet crickets since Obama became president, with his policy of drone strikes, his policies of continuing intervention in Syria, Somalia, Yemen, and Libya, of course. And again, nobody says anything. His excessive persecution of whistleblowers, like Chelsea Manning, and any number of people who brought up the issue of, disclosure of what we did in Iraq, war crimes that were sanctioned at the highest level, and yet we've done nothing to pursue any of the people that promoted those policies. We've only had prosecuted few individuals at low levels, very low levels, for anything involved in those crimes, much like we've never prosecuted hardly anybody of any significance in the banking industry for the collapse that they brought about after they were deregulated and allowed to run wild with our money and the Federal Reserve's money. After they were allowed to put hundreds of municipalities in bankruptcy, provide money loans, which then they passed off as derivatives to investors for countries like Greece and Italy and so forth. They're still doing this crap. Securitizing student loan debt. Why do you think the stock market's so high right now? I think it's because we're having record earnings. No. Our earnings are dropping. But there's no other place for people to put their money that, still want to be in the stock market, and institutional investors pretty much have to. Because the Federal Reserve's kept the money, and banks, central banks around the world have kept they've literally gone into negative interest rates. What does that mean? That means that they're actually paying you, okay? They're paying you money to take out a bond. And I mean 0%, who would buy those kind of things? But people are, because either they're afraid of a collapse of this artificially created stock market bubble, or they, what can you do? Some people have chased gold, but that's ridiculous at this point. And all of us liberals who point this out, all of us, people who supported Bernie Sanders, who just spoke the truth about our corrupt political system, our pay-for-play political system, in which the Clintons are just one example, maybe one of the worst examples, but hardly the only example of corruption, to their use of the Clinton Foundation and Bill Clinton's speeches and Hillary Clinton's speeches to amass huge amounts of wealth and influence and power, through the fact that Hillary Clinton was a senator and then later Secretary of State under President Obama. And now we have President Obama trying to pass the TPP. And we're, again, little kids. We don't understand how this is so beneficial. We don't understand how continual war is so beneficial for our national security and for our country survival. We don't understand how not upgrading our infrastructure is, just the price we have to pay for our freedoms. Yeah, we're damn dirty hippies. You're looking at one right here. What more can I say? Thank you, liberal media, for, telling me who I am. It's always nice to know. Signing off. Take care. Have a great week, everybody. Stephen D.